Hockey, as Brian knows, is a much more simplistic situation. We have strict limitations on what we can negotiate, what we can't negotiate. Those systems have evolved over, I guess, the last 25 years, since about 1994, I would say, when Gary Bettman, as the representative of the owners, started implementing restrictions on what you could negotiate. Prior to that, there were no restrictions, there was no cap. You could negotiate whatever bonuses you wanted, and I've been around long enough to have experienced all of those. So as Ian said, at the end of the day, when you don't have those restrictions, and in the context of having contracts that for the most part are guaranteed, subject to buyout, subject to being sent to the minors, if you have a two-way contract, you're negotiating term, you're negotiating annual average salary. And our jobs, and we say this, with no disrespect to anybody in management, because I see Brad coming up here, our job is to maximize our clients' value, both in terms of the AAV and the length of the contract. But the one qualifier that oftentimes comes into play that you do work with management, quite honestly, is the fit for the player. Okay, and that usually only happens in free agency, unrestricted free agency situations, but it can happen, in the first 7 years where a player just isn't the right fit. And at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer that if you put a player in the right circumstance where he's a fit, then he's going to enjoy his experience. The contract is going to basically work itself out. If you put a player, no matter what the dollar value is, in a situation where he's not going to fit, there's a lot of risk that you're incurring. And I've seen a number of players who have taken contracts that were probably overvalued in terms of what that player actually brought to the table, but they had a great season, they were going to unrestricted free agency. And we can name names, and the guy that comes to mind, quite honestly, has been retired for a long time. That was one of the first that this occurred with, was a guy like Marty Lapointe. Marty Lapointe had a great season in a year where I think Detroit probably won the Stanley Cup, and I think it was the Boston Bruins that signed him to an enormous contract, and it wasn't a fit. He didn't fit the personality of that team. It wasn't that he wasn't a good player, but he just didn't fit that $5 million threshold at that point in time. And life was miserable for him. Life was miserable for the Bruins. I think he eventually got traded to the Chicago Blackhawks, if I recall. It didn't fit there either. And so he left a team that he fit basically hand in glove. Went to two teams that he didn't fit into at all. His life was miserable. His wife's life, I'm sure, was miserable. So dollars are supremely important when you're trying to create a lifetime of income for a player, but you also have to make sure that those dollars work out in the right place, because the last thing that you want to have happen, and it's happened to numerous players, they've signed that big contract, and all of a sudden, instead of playing for the New York Rangers, you're playing for the Hartford Wolfpack.